So we have to, as fathers, recognize that, we have to, as Africans say, we have to go in balance. The Europeans have teach us individualism, but from an African point of view, we see equality between male and female. We don't feel that the male is superior to the female, and once you don't accept that, we say you're out of balance, and all kinds of things happen. So I want to urge fathers to return to the African tradition, and rebalance yourself, respect your spouses, see her as equal to you. There is no, you know, difference between man and woman. Nobody is superior, but it's just compatible, and you know, and this whole tradition, we have to recomprehend this tradition.
Okay, well, I mean, we're not into a sociological discussion, but you're urging fathers to stand up to their roles, and it has been a cry in our society. It's not only Guyanese society, but I think it's a trend that is pervading a large section of the world where men seem not to be, as you said, living up to their responsibilities, Brother Trotman. Um, Before we go into our political discourse, what can be some of the factors contributing to this? Brother Ogun seemed to have hinted that the movement from Africa to this part of the world and the influence of the West would have contributed. But is that all that is contributing to the fact that so many fathers are not in the homes of their children and are not contributing to the well-being of their families?
Personally, I believe that it really has to do, to a large extent, with the inability or the reluctance of men to recognize that they have a role to play. Tukumu made a very important point when he said that your role as a father is not only the sperm that you contribute to the making of a child, but it's much more than that. And perhaps that is just the beginning. And if it is that you really want to be recognized as a father, regardless of what your circumstances are, there are certain responsibilities that you really cannot get away from. And so that I believe that until there's a great awareness that the role of a father is a very comprehensive one, and that you really can't escape your responsibilities. A lot of the men that I know will want to say to people that they have children all over the place. But if it is that you ask them what did they do in order to contribute to the development of those children, they can't answer. And so because of this lack of knowledge, I believe that is what is it in part. But I also believe it is a kind of reluctance to assume the responsibility. Some of them know, but it's a kind of reluctance to assume the responsibility that being a father demands. And so that until it comes back to the original point I'm making, until it is that men, come around to realizing that being a father is not a name thing only, but it is a very serious, it has serious responsibilities. Maybe there will be some law in which it is that you can exclude, persons who don't recognize disability from being fathers. I mean, that's being far-fetched. But I think that you understand where I'm going.
Yeah,
It's a serious responsibility, and unless we men recognize and assume this responsibility, I don't know that I can fairly say that I can say to a person that you're a father that is an exemplar to other persons.
You see, you said you didn't want a sociological discussion, but if we were to try to answer the question you pose, we can't avoid it on some sociological issues.
Yeah.
You see, biologically, it is easy to become a father. Once you have sperms and you have a willing female to accept those sperms, you can become a father. It's simple. In fact, once you plant your sperms, if you're lucky to fertilize the egg, you could dare the child gonna come.
Okay.
You work done. But you see, once you move from biology to sociology, the responsibility that comes with bringing a child into the world, this is where the trouble starts. And basically, we got to understand that whatever thinking that people have on any issue, to a great extent, it comes from the society, and by society I mean only Guyana, the whole world,
Yeah.
okay? And what is happening, the traditional family that we were accustomed to rear children is under pressure by economic and social pressures of the society. And remember, when you enter into a relationship with a woman, man enter into a woman, and you start to get children, the financial and other responsibilities become very, very important. And if the man can't fit the bill, he's under tremendous pressure. And what's the men do? As soon as they're under pressure, they decide to back out and leave the woman and leave the family, you know,
But still want to be recognized
and
as
still
fathers.
want to be recognized as fathers, you know. So it's a whole complicated and complex phenomenon. We can't do it this afternoon. We probably got to devote a special program to look at the dynamics.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, though, it boils down to what you had in your head in terms of these matters, so you could navigate, you know, some path. You see, a man would say, look, how could I not, how could I be expected to put greater part of my money in the home? I ain't there in the home. I ain't getting no food. I got to maintain myself. I got to maintain another thing, you know. And he sees, and men hide under that. No, we can't dismiss it as not an issue. But if you're of a certain line of thinking, you may find a compromise that will make a bad situation, you know, a little better. But these are real problems.
But one final thing, the concerns that a lot of men find the time to engage in all kinds of, well, for them, it's enjoyment, parties, drinking, spending their monies on basically self, you know, enjoying themselves and so on. And when their children approach them for things for school, for sustenance and so on, and they seem reluctant to give. Now, how does that factor in terms of their perception of their role? You know, as fathers, some people can, you know, consider. They don't party, they don't, once in a while, occasionally you take a drink, all right? But it's not an overall aspect of your life that every weekend you're at a bar, or every evening you're at a bar, you're at some show here, there, and when your children are in need, you find it difficult to give. How do we, what kind of thinking goes into the minds of these individuals? Well, if Freddie was here, he would have psychoanalyzed them, but I don't know. If any of you, I mean,
Well, I mean, I don't think there's one answer to all the issues. You probably got to look at things more particular. But generally, what happened is that once the man get disconnect from the children, and you begin to fashion a life without that close responsibility, if he is not of a certain mindset,
okay.
that he recognized, like, I have to put, despite the fact I'm not with my children, I have to put aside money for them, because at some point in time, I got to find money for them. You know? So it depends upon the mindset, you know, and it's hard to know what goes on in some people's head.
Yeah, it's difficult. And I think, you know, as youngsters growing, it should be an experience for us. That, you know, if your parents, your father neglected you, then you should learn from that experience. And you shouldn't take that to mean that because my father neglected me, that I should neglect my children. Personally, the experience for me was that, okay, if you, all right, your mother was your father for a major part of your life, then the informed position was that my children would not go through that same kind of experience. All right, and so it's a matter of denying yourself certain pleasures in order to make sure that your children are comfortable and that they
Well,
are.
your children can use the same household. The real challenge comes
When you're
when
I don't really
that's
see the
real.
distinction.
No, because no,
I
there's
see
some
a
men narrow-minded.
responsibility. Uh-huh.
Some men narrow-minded. Some men will say, look, the woman is living in the next house with the next man. If I give you money for my children, she man and spend the money. It's a lot of
It's
pettiness
your
coming.
children, buddy.
No, but he will say he has no.
It's an
no,
excuse.
Yes, I'm saying that, and they make it.
Right.
And they say that, look, I have no real certain how that is gonna happen. Forgetting that when he in control with the man in the house with the woman, minding the children. Some says narrow-minded, nasty-mindedness. But I'm
Okay.
telling you, they become nasty when when the separation takes place.
But maybe the way to reduce the kind of behavior
Uh-huh.
is for the laws to be more impactful.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that that you have the kind of laws legislated to ensure that more men take responsibilities for their thing. Men want to know that they're child fathers.
Okay.
It's another thing. You very often, I'm quite sure that you will hear men talk about being child fathers with eight different women.
Mm-hmm. It's a macho kind
Yeah, but no contribution.
perspective on.
Some of them, even when it is that they live in a home with a woman, and the woman is, making children for them, they don't even feel that they should be supporting them, and there has to be some kind of way in which you could deal with a kind of situation.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem because the problem is reflected in the entire society. I mean, the children, when they're left in that position, many of them turn to
Deanna, want to come off screen for a minute?
yeah, turn to other activities that basically, lead them to not being productive members of society, and that affects the entire society in the end, which is not pretty good.
Yeah, see, Diana, whether we like it or we like it or not, society will have to take a greater responsibilities to reduce the negatives on children, who are victims of
Exactly.
broken
Mhm.
families and so. And at the end of the day, I think society has to come in and to ease some of the pressures. See, I mean, I don't want to make excuse, but I mean, if a man working for $60,000 a month,
Mhm.
he got two families to maintain himself. It is almost impossible that he could maintain himself and his children who is in the next situation. Even they carry to court. I mean, most people go to court. The court impose, okay, how much they got to pay, and they can't pay. They end up in jail a couple of times, and even the court and even the wives get discussed. It's a waste of time.
Mm.
So these things,
Yeah, it's a complex problem, and we're hopeful that, like you said, more and more men, we understand the economics of the whole thing, but it's a responsibility, and I think one of the things that needs to be considered is the fact that your means, your ability to maintain, you can't be working for $60,000 as you have said, and want to go making children here, there, and everywhere.
That's not a consideration that ever enters the mind of any man.
Why not?
No, you talking about the ideal situation, but it's not a consideration, I believe, that enters into any man's that will be the last thought that a man will have.
But I don't want us to degenerate. Some men will tell you, look, some men will say when they go to bed a woman, they don't go to bed to make a child.
Okay, all right.
But it's not always consciously, deliberately
That's
set
not
out
a
to make a
consideration.
child.
It's not a
But
consideration.
the child is coming.
Okay, all right. Well, gentlemen, on this Father's Day, we are admonishing you to pay attention to your children. Uh, the fact is, too many instances arise where fathers only recognize their children when they grow old. Some of them turn up at their children's doors and want to impose themselves, when in fact they had no role in the life of the children,
Made no contribution.
made
to
no
the children.
contribution.
And when the child becomes
Right.
successful, it's my
Yeah,
child.
it's my child, you know, it's really
It's ridiculous.
an outrageous and ridiculous thing. Be fathers to your children. Make sure that you are a part of their lives, contribute to their development, their education, and everything. And then, I mean, the other thing is that you're not making children for your life insurance. I think too many of our people believe that you make children because you are investing, you're in an insurance policy, right? Provide for yourself. Try to. It's good that children, because of the roles their parents have played, pay attention to their parents, but try to ensure that your children are provided for and that you set a foundation for them, so that when they do, begin to blossom, they can be able to take care of you without it being too much of a burden to themselves. All right, but regardless, you look after your children, children look after your parents. That's the African way, isn't it, Ogun? Right? That the older people in society were revered as elders, as people with wisdom, and they were cherished. And we need to get back to that and respect it. All right, but Brother Trotman, what is really happening with the GCOM situation? We now see in this dispensation that a PPP that did everything in its power to alter the nature of the public service, to alter the nature of GCOM, to alter the nature of the landscape in terms of the economic landscape of Guyana, through racial genocide and racial, economic, disenfranchisement and everything that you could have talked about. Now shouting and claiming by the very architect of that kind of policy, Bar Jagdio, through his henchmen, Roger Luncheon and Robeson Ben, that GCOM is predominantly African Guyanese. How I saw Vincent in a very good letter, and then another staff of GCOM highlighting the glaring discrepancy in the statements that are being uttered by those gentlemen. But what is really happening? What are they attempting to do?
I think you've got to really recognize, Dion, that this is a very carefully orchestrated plan by the People's Progressive Party to, and it's geared to the 2020 elections
Okay.
to ensure that they have, I believe, control of the whole elections process. And it started off with the appointment of
Deputy.
the GCOM chairman,
Okay.
who they tried to give the impression was appointed primarily for the purpose of ensuring that the rigging of the elections, the 2020 elections, take place. It continued with my own appointment to the commission because the attacks on me were not as vicious as the attacks on the chairman of the commission, but it took a similar kind of line, old and rigged. That was there. But it became more intensive when it is that the UNDP wrote the commission and asked that the full commission meet with a visiting team that was looking at the possibilities, looking at needs assessment and the possibilities of providing assistance to GCOM to strengthen its organizational fabric. And we had that meeting. At that meeting, Robeson Ben spoke about the composition of the staff at GCOM. And he gave the impression that the staff situation was heavily favored for African Guyanese persons. Subsequently, at least one other public forum, he gave numbers to that situation, where he talked about the staff being more than 90% African Guyanese. I want you to note what I'm saying. He talked about the staff being more than 90% African Guyanese. Subsequently, he was asked to provide the information that he had at his disposal. A number of us requested that. The chairman did, Vincent Alexander did, I did. And I pointed out to him that in the absence of this information, what he is doing is laying the foundation for violence in the ethnic violence taking place in this society. And he came with some ridiculous position. Anyhow, the chairman of the commission did present information which said that the ethnic composition of GCOM is 46% African Guyanese and some other figures that they do. Now, I think that when the chairman came out with that explanation, what he did was he bust Ben's bar and the PPP's bar. And anyhow, the request for Ben to produce his information didn't materialize. And there was some to and fro in between he and the chairman, and eventually he walked out of the. They walked out of the discussions
because they had nothing to substantiate their claim.
They felt that the chairman of the commission had said that he will prevent. They felt that the chairman of the commission said that he will prevent Ben from speaking. What the chairman of the commission said, that Ben could participate in the discussions, but he will not allow him to disrupt the meetings.
Okay.
And they took it for granted that he was laying an embargo on and they walked out. Anyhow, the matters came to head when the position of the deputy chief elections officer was finalized. We had the interviews. Now, I didn't want to go in this direction because I noted that the initial response of Vishnu Prasad when the PPP said that they were going to the Ethnic Relations Commission was that he didn't want he wasn't going to be, he wasn't participating in the process. But he subsequently made some comments. And so as a result of that, I'm going to speak on what happened during the course of the interviews. During the course of the interview for the position.
Who does the interview?
The interviews were done by Ben and Shadik from the PPP side, Vincent Alexander and myself from the other side. Okay. There were four of us. We did the initial interviews, and it was agreed that when we were finished, we will recommend it to the larger commission what our decisions were, and the larger commission will finalize what the decision was, whatever decision they took. Now, one of the arguments that they're making, the PPP is making, and I want to shift slightly from the Vishnu Prasad matter. One of the arguments that the PPP is making is that the commission is not facilitating the candidacy of Indian persons. Again, it's a misrepresentation of what took place because they have conveniently forgotten that for the position of IT manager, the person who was recommended for the position is an Indian person. And I want to add that if it is that there's any thinking about rigging of the elections, that thinking will have to take into consideration who's the person controlling the IT position. It is one of the most critical positions within the Elections Commission. And it has a serious bearing on the election results. But the person who was recommended and the decision was made to appoint him was an Indian person.
Well, I read that Alexander was claiming that that was not the choice of that was the recommendation that was put forward.
That was the recommendation.
And the chairman concurred with that.
The chairman concurred. The chairman had no problem with the decision. Okay. That was the right thing. When it went to the full commission, it was approved. During the course of the interview with Vishnu Prasad, his conduct at the interview is what militated against some of us not recommending him for the position. I'll tell you, in one instance, he claimed ownership of a very important project at election stand. He claimed ownership, conceptualization, delivery. And then it was pointed out to him after he claimed that. But that project was a failed project for years. It has been a failed project. And he claimed ownership of the project for years. I made the observation that it was a failed project. And so I said to him, well, you know, if you're claiming ownership of this, you're claiming ownership of something that failed. And so for me, it had an impact on my own decisions. He also lied to the commission, to the interviewers, on a number of things, including his qualifications. So that when it was that the recommendations, when we had to make the recommendations, persons from the PPP recommended him for the position. And Vincent and I recommended another candidate who presented a very excellent image of herself, understanding of the process. And the recommendations went to the larger commission. The two other commissioners, because remember, there's only 4 commissioners participating in the interviewing process. The 2 other commissioners, not the chairman, the 2 other commissioners, one agreed with the recommendations for Vishnu Prasad. The other one agreed with the recommendation that we made for Roxanne Myers. And so that we were deadlocked. And the chairman was required to make a casting vote. The recommendation was that the transcripts of both persons will be provided. And it's on the basis of the transcripts the decision will be made. Again, the 2 commissioners who weren't privy to the interviews, they made their own recommendations in relation to the transcripts. One for Vishnu, one for Roxanne Myers. The thing went to the chairman. The chairman took 3 weeks to make a decision because he said he wanted to consider the thing in all its parameters. And at the end of that period, he announced that he was casting his vote for Roxanne Myers. That's where the thing then became even worse within the commission. They accused the chairman of having an ethnic response to the candidates when he made this casting vote. What they haven't said to the public is that it was the second time the chairman was being asked to make a casting vote on a recommendation coming from the interviewing panel. The first occasion had to do with the recommendation for the position of legal officer. Originally, a number of persons had applied for the position. 2 persons were shortlisted, and both of them were listed to appear before the interviewing panel. 1 person backed out. So we interviewed the only other candidate who was available, who had excellent credentials. And in fact, after that interview, Commissioner Shaddick said that she would have scored the person 100, except that he hadn't practiced in Guyana. And so that she doesn't believe that he was qualified for the position. Robeson Ben then attempted to introduce what I thought was a spurious reason for objecting to the man. He couldn't support it with evidence. But anyhow, he was making that as one of the reasons why it is that he couldn't support it. On the other hand, both Alexander and myself supported the man's thing, but again, it had to go to the larger commission. We went thing with the recommendation is that we divided on this thing, and the commission will have had to make its decision. Says Gunraj from the PPP, who wasn't in the interviews, he supported the PPP's position. Charles Corbin supported our position. So we had a tie. The chairman was then required to make the casting vote. And the chairman made the casting vote in support of the position that the PPP provided. So the PPP objected, we supported. The chairman, in making this casting vote, supported the PPP's position. They haven't said anything about that.
And this was an African candidate?
And the candidate was an African person, a Guyanese. They haven't said anything about that because they don't want to give the impression that the chairman
Is unbiased.
is unbiased in this matter. They don't want to give that impression. So that they're using this thing about, look, let me tell you something. Let them produce the evidence of this ethnic imbalance. This 90% ethnic imbalance. What happened? What happened? Something very instructive happened after the chairman made his ruling. Ben then changed his position about ethnic imbalance. Where it was that he was talking about ethnic imbalance being 90% across the board, he then reduced his this thing to the 90% being in the top echelon of the commission staff. And I said that you can't do that now. Your original position was about all of the staff members. Cannot introduce that element. Anyhow, they walked out. And the situation is that they say that they're going to go to the Ethnic Relations Commission.
They're going to court too. And
they're going to court on the matter. And I will only say they must do everything that they want to do. In the same way like how it is that they contested the appointment of the chairman of the commission, I believe they're free to go to wherever they want to. But we must understand that this thing is something which is well orchestrated. They don't have proof that supports their original position that 90% of the persons in the in the staff of the commission is African
Who
Guyanese.
would have been responsible for that? If after 23 years,
No, but listen.
even if it were so, let's say if it were so,
Mhm.
who would have been responsible for
No,
that?
but the fact of the matter is, and that's something that they're not engaging in. One of the problems, and we gotta congratulate those persons who are staff members. One of the problems that staff members are faced with is the low salaries that existed, and it's only recently, about 2-3 years ago, when there was a survey was commissioned, staffing and all those things, and salaries, that as a result of that survey, salaries were increased to what I believe is a more acceptable level. But the fact of the matter, in my own thing, the staffing is the thing is the shock. But the more important point I want to make is this, Dion. From 1997 to 2011, all of the problems in relation to the election results had nothing to do with those persons who are the lower level of the staff. It had to do with the way in which it is. In 1997, I was present when Stanley Singh tried to dupe the populace in making the election results. He stood up at what we call a verification process, and he was saying, he was announcing the results of the general elections, and he was saying, take the regional as being in the same way. After the third time, I said, no, this is an illegality, because the document that you gotta use, you don't have. And the document that he had to use to make the thing was the statement of polls. He didn't have that. And I objected. Kemred Ramjatan, who was representing the PPP at that verification exercise, said, don't worry, this is between the PPP and the PNC. Mr. Corbyn was there, and Mr. Corbyn said, he noted the objection. He said, I'm going to allow the process to continue to see what is happening. We have the tally sheets and we go into it. But the thing went, he continued, didn't have the statements of poll. And at a certain time, Corbyn said, enough is enough. It's nonsense. And that is how it is that we had the CARICOM audit committee that came into the country to do an audit. That's 1997. 2001, 2006. 2006 was when Gokul Bodu stole the AFC seat and gave it to Sam Hines, the AFC geographical seat in Region 10, and gave it to Sam Hines. Fully aware, fully knowing that once it is he made the announcement, it could not be reversed unless you go to court. He knew that. And that was pointed out to him, but he went ahead and he made the announcement. In 2011, the APNU, over 10,000 votes disappeared in the air. And it had to, the APNU had to make a representation in an attempt to get back, in order to get back those votes, because he was prepared to rig the elections in favor of the PPP. So that this thing here about, if the composition of the Elections Commission being made up in a certain way, the staffing being made up in a certain way, and it will lead to rigging, they have to say why it is from 1997 to 2011, the rigging took place with a certain set of people being in charge of the process.
Well, Brother Owen, as a political analyst, what is your understanding of the PPP's mouthing these allegations and trying to trump up this feeling of racial insecurity in relation to the uh, elections of 2020?
Um, you see, you can look at it from more than one point of views. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, historically, the way in which the PPP mobilized its constituency in the PNC era, when the PNC was in power, was to use the cry of rig elections, and it become so implanted in the Indian Guyanese political psyche, okay, that it helped to mobilize that constituency with a snap of a finger
Okay.
and trigger all kinds of feelings and so. But we had a struggle to establish fair and free elections, and fair and free elections took place in '92, which saw the return to PPP to power. And since then, the Elections Commission has conducted elections that the PPP won from '92 to 2011. And if you watch the commission workers in the main, it's basically the same stuff, just a little changes here and there. But now that the PPP find themselves faced with the 2020 elections, okay, they want to behave like though the election commission as it stand is the old election commission of the bygone days. But this present election commission, in the context of Guyanese's situation, the way in which arrangements have been put in place from '92 onwards, the election commission is not controlled by no political party. The ruling party don't have the same control of the election commission as in the old days, and they know it. But you see, the PPP is trying to walk on two legs. On the one hand, they know that the local government elections will be held, and they know that the election commission will deliver fair and free elections. They know it because the last elections coming just after the national elections, the election commission delivered fair and free elections, and they won. So I don't think they're looking down the road that's quite reached 2020, and they have a clearly line of march that they want to install in the commission at key positions people who they feel will do the biddings of the PPP. And as Trotty correctly pointed out, that the rigging that evolved after '92, when the PPP is in power, rigging evolved. In the old PNC days, it was a crude rigging. In the PPP days, rigging continue, and it evolved in a certain way, in which key people, okay, the election commission, and I try to name some of them, Boudou and others, who use their position in the thing to manipulate the process. Got nothing to do with the bulk of the rank and file staff, as Trotty correctly pointed out. And that is why on key appointments, they're going to keep shouting foul all the time unless they get their own people in place. And I think that regardless of whatever they shout, I think it's important that the election members of the election commission and the chairman act on integrity, okay, and look for the best candidates who could deliver the job, people with morality, people who are not directly under the control of the PPP, because the PPP want people who are under their control,
so that they can continue to rig.
They continue. You see, the PPP still behaves like though they're in government, They are, and the whole psych, is that they want to be able to get instructions to the staff of the commission, like they used to do when they were in government.
Yeah, but let me, OG raised a very important point, and I want to go back to it. On the commission, some of us believe that appointments must be made only on the basis of meritocracy, and so that we're very harsh in relation to who comes before us. Let me tell you something. I took a position in relation to a candidate who was vying for the position, the same position that Vishnu Prasad was vying for. deputy chief election officer. The person came, I listened, and when my turn came to ask questions, I said to him that my conscience don't permit me to consider you as a fit and proper person for this position. I said that to him. Robson Ben, when the candidate said thank you. And he said that he understood what I was saying. That's the candidate's response. He said thank you, and I understand what you're saying. When he left the room, Robson Ben said, you know, Trotty, you're very harsh. And I don't think you should have said that to him. I said I felt that I had to let him know how I feel about his candidacy. But if it is that you feel as strongly as that, I won't say that to any other candidate. But I will be very, very careful on how it is they present themselves, how it is I score when they present themselves. And let me tell you, if truth be known, you see they're talking about Reagan, but they're not saying what happens in the interviews, what has happened in the interviews. There were two persons, I mean, I'm saying this fully aware that I'm going to get a lot of flack from parties which the people came from. There were two candidates who came before us, Afro-Guyanese candidates. The person who I said, who I told that I won't, my conscience don't permit me to consider him as an Afro-Guyanese. There were two others. During the course of the interview, we don't ever ask persons which political party they belong to. That's not our concern. That is not our concern. But if it is a candidate comes before me at the interview, and he says that I have taken, he expresses a preference for a political party, I will have to be very careful in my consideration of that candidate, that person. We don't ask persons, why then should you volunteer your preference for a certain party? And we have taken the decision, Vincent and I have taken the decision, that when it is those candidates appear, we were going to treat with them in a certain. And the PPP is aware of that. But it doesn't suit their purpose when it is they're talking about rigging, to say, but you know, at least 3 candidates who came before the commission for this position were treated in a certain way, and all 3 of them were African Guyanese. They don't say that because it defeats the purpose of the exercise.
Their exercise, you're talking
Their exercise.
Okay.
We are dealing with persons only on the basis of meritocracy. And I am not going to be apologizing for taking that position. I am not going to be apologizing for taking that position. And I support the position that Vincent took relative to the letters that he took. He's absolutely correct. It's all that he has done in his letters is narrated what actually took place. And I support his position. It has nothing to do with that. You know, they're not even saying that they attempted to influence the chairman to give you 3 and get them 3. They're not saying that.
Which you really
I want to say this publicly. The chairman's conduct in his work so far is above board. He is doing, I consider to be an excellent job. He's showing no bias. He's fair. He allows the discussion to take place. And then when he believes it gets out of hand, he gets involved in it. And they don't like him simply because he's not malleable. And there's another aspect of this thing. You know, the PPP is trying to condition the minds of black people to believe that every black person is a dishonest person. And every Indian person is a fair and honest person. I'm not going to allow anybody to condition my mind into believing what they want me to
Now,
believe.
once an African Guyanese goes there, it's going to be
Yes,
something
and you know, it's something has to be wrong with them. When I was asked if I would take this position, the position was offered a couple of days after the WPA made a very important point that it will not condone rigging or it will or support it.
But they won't say that either.
No, but you see, we must say it. When they make this foolish argument about rigging, yeah, we must point out that I was appointed after the WPA made it clear, and I go to the thing with I go there, upholding WPA's positions on a lot of these matters, and rigging is not part of our agenda.
One other thing, Trotty, because time is almost on us. The IT department, you said it's a crucial component of the election
Yeah.
process. Didn't we have a lot of problems with that
We
department?
had, and that's why I was making the point that if it is that you're thinking in terms of rigging, you will want to know that you have somebody you can control in opposition. But we, on the basis of the material that came before us, we all agreed that the person best suited for this job is the person who we appointed, and he's an Indian Guyanese. Let me tell. I will go forward and tell you that I am impressed by a member of staff who works in the IT section, but who I understand don't have the academic qualification. And I'm going to argue at some point in time within the commission that we have to consider those persons. If it is that person is suitable for position, we have to be able to take into consideration a number of other things in order to allow a person to emerge. That person I'm talking about is Indo-Guyanese. And if it is that he had appeared before the commission based on how I see his performance is, I perhaps will have selected him. Because I'm quite satisfied that the way in which he works with the best interest of not only the commission, but with the people of the country too. But they're not telling you that the first person, the person in one of the most critical positions in the thing, in the commission's secretariat, is the IT person, and we recommended him, even though he's Indo-Guyanese. So that's nonsense they're talking
one time
about.
they had to throw out the IT results and
What foolishness they're talking about.
okay.
Yeah, we
But
can.
it's I don't know, understand we gotta understand the PPP's politics. But what is it that Jack Dio is saying? I mean, this matter of the Elections Commission, we know it's basically trying to lay the foundation for claims that the elections were rigged and so on. And everything that they're doing, they're preparing the ground for this claim that they have been cheated.
But it's
Right.
more than
It's
that.
not the first time that
Dion is more than that. What he's attempting to do is to energize his base to the point
That
that
they-
come 2020, that they're going to be there voting. That's the idea. But you see, I don't want it. I mean, the threats that he's making, the kind of. If Jack Dio was president, he would have arrested other persons if it is that they use the same language, you know. But I don't want the government to play his game. I don't want the government to play his game. Let him say what he wants. I'm confident, based on what I see, the work that I see within the commission, that the commission is working impartially, with the best interest of the country at heart, and it's going to deliver, I believe, very good elections. If it is that the PPP is committed to participate in the local government elections, if they want the local government elections, because I'm worried, I'm saying this here publicly, I'm worried that a subcommittee of the commission, which is supposed to be meeting and vetting the plans of the secretariat going forward, has not met for a number of weeks. And that subcommittee is headed by a PPP commissioner. And I wonder why it is that it's not meeting as it should be meeting. Advance the process has to be advanced. And I see that as holding back the process. So I'm now beginning to wonder if it is that they want local government elections this year.
Well, you know that during their time, they hadn't local government elections.
For the longest while, but it worries them that the coalition has said it will deliver local government elections whenever it is due. Whenever it is due. The final point I want to make, those two persons who I'm telling you about, who announced their political preference, they then, and we decided that, I decided that I'm taking a certain position, weren't persons who spoke on behalf of the PPP. So you get a sense of what does that mean. They're African Guyanese and they weren't members of the PPP. They didn't say they had a preference to the PPP.
Well, Guyanese have to be very conscious of what is happening. And I believe to you don't want to stifle the media and what they do, but Jagdeo has a lot of airtime, more than he might have even had as president, as the Minister of State has said. And he has been using that time to create all kinds of mischief, continuing his own, role of creating ethnic divisions within the society. It's the PPP's game. It's what they have thrived on for all the years, and it's what they will continue to try to do, because they have lost some of their base in the 2015 elections, and they're hoping that they could recapture that base that they've lost, and they don't care how they do it. All right, they will try to defeat every aspect of progress, see it as negative. They will not compliment any achievement or gains that that is being made under the current administration, and they will resort to every tactic to make the Indo-Guyanese believe that they are under threat, and that this perception of the Afro-Guyanese as bad and as criminals, as every conceivable evil that can be, they will continue to use that as a means of pulling the votes that they desire for the elections. But it's the point that you're raising, that they possibly don't want local government elections, is something that is a revelation, and we have to see how that plays out coming down to
I begin to wonder if it is the thing. I've heard too many comments about that possibility, local government elections not being held. And so I'm concerned about it. And I'm concerned about the fact that this particular committee, which should be helping to advance the process, is not meeting. I'm a member of that committee. It is not meeting. And it's a committee that is chaired by a PPP commissioner. And we haven't met for about the last nearly a month. Okay. 3-4 weeks.
Over your last words, please, before we close off here this evening.
I just think that we're going to see more of Jagdeo, the PPP antics. We will have much more. We have time to interrogate it more carefully. But it's just the beginning.
It is.
It's been a pleasure with you. Gentlemen, thanks for being here this evening. And to the viewers out there, I want to thank you for being with us here again on HBTV Channel 9. And I want to again admonish GT&T to come fix my internet. I don't have internet. CXC marking should begin pretty soon. I can't mark, I'm going to have to get my money from GT&T, because I'm going to take them where I can have the compensation that I would have received from marking. So something has to play, something has to give. But I mean, it's over a month.
Ridiculous.
I mean, this is since last year, Trotty. You remember?
Yeah.
I've not been able to upload my videos or any such thing, and so on. And now I'm going to be every week I have to be buying a plan with the hope that this week
it will happen.
It will happen. So all of those monies I'll be claiming for, it's not good enough. GT&T, fix my service. Thank you, folks out there. Do have a good night. Happy Father's Day again to all you fathers out there.